ठीक है, so today's session is on, or at least is the introduction to neuroscience of emotion. So this today's session will also be the template that we'll be discussing for the further sessions that we'll have on different psychological phenomena such as cognition, perception, and emotion, of course. So we discussed today in our round as well. I think only Shivram is here from our round today. That most psychological phenomena in our body go through certain steps, followed by a final common pathway by which it is discharged. For example, like we had discussed in the last session, also your motor and endocrine immune response is one kind of response that your body has. Right, your brain sort of coordinates it, processes it, modulates it, and says that when a certain response is necessary, and it produces it. So what we're going to try to do today is cover the basics of emotion, what emotion is, what are the different theories of emotion, and then talk a little bit about the common pathways of all the emotions in the body, or at least most of the emotions in the body, so that later when we're talking about specific emotions, we can get done with it a little quicker because most of it is common to a lot of emotions. Okay, so we'll just, yeah. So this is how we'll be progressing today, defining emotion, theories of emotion, the brain and emotion specifically, and we'll also discuss the limbic circuitry in a bit of detail because again that is a recurring theme throughout most emotional circuits that we'll talk about later. Okay, so can any one of you tell me what you mean by emotion? Not the textbook definition of it, if you have read that, of course, but that we'll cover later. What do you think is the, how would you say कि emotion क्या होता है अगर किसी ने पूछा ऐसे या पेशेंट ने पूछा तुमसे या रैंडम किसी ने पूछा? फर्स्ट ईयर्स?
It is the
हाँ श्रेयस बताओ.
so it is the response of our mind and body to external circumstances.
Right, great. That's one definition. First years, anyone? No, I'm not asking the Fish Sims definition. I'm just asking, like, as a lay person, how would you define an emotion? It's a term that we use in almost daily work, right? Not just restricted to psychiatry. I mean, वैसे भी हम बोलते हैं ना कि emotional हो रहा है ऐसे, or I'm feeling angry, I'm feeling sad. These are day-to-day things that we talk about. So, what do you mean exactly? How do you think you can define an emotion?
It's a expression of current state of mind of a person.
Expression of your current state of mind. Great. Anyone else? So the reason I'm asking is that this is a question that has sort of plagued psychology and psychiatry since a very, very long time. Nobody has ever been able to stick to a standard definition that this is how we want to define emotion. Different authors have had different opinions about this, right? So a paper by these two people, Klingina and Klingina, in 1981, they compiled a lot of definitions of emotion, and what they found is they found 92 different definitions made by prominent psychologists, psychiatrists, people working in the field, and interestingly 9 skeptical statements as well, who basically said that there is no point in defining emotion or that it cannot be defined at all, right? So then what they did is they tried to categorize this into 11 categories, right? Affective definitions, cognitive definitions, external stimuli definitions, physiological definitions. So I've just put it on screen just to give you an idea, but you don't need to remember this, please don't worry, right? Unless if you want to, of course. So what emerged from this paper basically is that we decided certain core components of emotion based on what all these people are saying, right? So for example, one of them is your physical or somatic component, that whenever you feel an emotion, there is a definite physical component. Like when you're angry, your pulse rate might increase. When you're afraid, you might start sweating, you might have dryness of mouth, you might have palpitations, right? All of these. So that is the physical or somatic component of emotion, basically determined by your sympathetic and parasympathetic systems. Second is your cognitive component of emotion, that when we label an emotion, that yes, now I'm feeling angry, or now I'm feeling sad, now I'm feeling afraid, right? So that is the conscious awareness of this state. Third is based on triggers, like I think what Shreya said, right? It is the response you have to an external stimulus. So you can define an emotion as something that is in response to certain types of stimuli. So for example, if there is a dangerous stimulus in front of you, the emotion that you feel might be fear. So what you feel in that moment is an emotion. The fourth is based on your response to that. I think Brinda had said something along those lines, that whenever you're feeling something, what response you have to that is also a component of your emotion. You may change your facial expressions, you may make certain movements, you may do certain activities, you may say certain things. All of this motor behavioral response is also a component of emotion. Two definitions that kind of focused on kind of different phenomena are based on disruption, that whenever you have an emotion, it is something that disrupts your inner homeostasis, that you're feeling a certain state at a point of time, something happens and there is a disruption in your internal homeostatic process, right? You're angry now or you're sad now. And sort of a corollary to that is the functional component of emotion, that this serves a certain function, right? A tiger comes in front of you and you're feeling afraid. So the point of this fear is that this is what enables you to run away or to get away from the situation, right? So these are the core components of emotion that various definitions are focused on, right? So keeping this in mind, we'll see some of the definitions that are most commonly accepted, right? So the first is the one that you're expected to say when somebody asks you in your rounds or in your exams or whatever, that what is emotion? This is what Fish defines it as, right? A stirred up state, that is the disruption part, caused by physiological changes, that is the somatic part, in response to some event, that is the trigger part, and which tends to maintain or abolish the causative event, right? So that is the function part, that something has happened in the environment and there is a stirred up state, there is a disruption in your internal state, which is caused by certain physiological changes, and the point of this is to either make sure that whatever happened keeps happening or to get away from what's happening, right? Like if you have some food and you feel happy about it, the function of that happiness is that you want to do this again. Or if you encounter something and you feel afraid by it, then the point of it is that you don't want to encounter the situation, or you want to end this event from happening. So, right, this is the Fish definition of it, which has remained constant for a very, very long time. I think I have a third edition of Fish. It's written sometime in the 80s, and even in that book also, this definition has stayed the same. A more recent definition is by the APA, that is the American Psychological Association, in their dictionary. They have a more, I feel, reasonable explanation, or at least meaningful definition of emotion, that it's a complex reaction pattern, that is your behavior part, involving experiential, behavioral, and physiological elements, right? Experiential is basically your cognition of your experience, behavioral, as the name implies, and physiological elements by which an individual attempts to deal with personally significant matter or event. So this personally significant part is something that they have added, that this is something, all emotions are only felt in response to something which is personally significant. So there is a component of motivation that has been added to this, right? Just a sec. Yeah. An even more recent definition, in fact, from this year by Malezieux et al., they have published a review of the theory of emotions and neurocircuitry of emotions. So they have a very experimental definition, that an emotion is a functional state that are adaptive to the organism, and this characterized by a lot of these terms that they've used: global coordination, pleiotropy, valence, intensity, priority, generalization, persistence, right? We'll talk about this in a little more detail. So their focus is basically, how do you measure emotion? Like if you want to do a study about emotion, the internal state of the person cannot really be measured, right? You can't really know what is going on. So we generally tend to rely on self-reports of emotion. Most studies that we do, even something like a HAMD or a HAMA that you're doing, you're relying on a self-report of anxiety or self-report of depression, right? So for experimental studies, they have designed this term to differentiate it from other psychopathology, other psychological phenomena such as motivation, such as cognition, all of these things. And this is the definition that they've come to, right? This is what they called observable emotion, right? So what they said is that there is a stimulus, and the stimulus is adjustable in terms of, if you're doing an experiment on emotion, you should be able to adjust the stimulus. And even in real life, the stimulus itself is adjustable. It's not always the same kind of stimulus. The stimulus may vary in its intensity. It may have the feature of generalizability, right? For example, a certain taste makes you happy, then the smell of that food will also make you happy. The sight of that food will also make you happy. Talking about that food will also make you happy. When we talk about learning theories, we'll talk about the concept of generalization. Or if you studied it, you may know already. And the stimulus is also put in context by certain other things, such as your past experiences, right? You have memory of certain things. So the response to it will be in context of this memory based on your need states. For example, if you're feeling very hungry, you might feel more irritable, you might feel more angry, and once you eat it, you might feel happier than you would if you were eating when you were already full. And competing drives, for example, if you're having multiple competing drives, if you're feeling hungry but at the same time you're feeling sad and you're feeling angry at the same time, then these drives will sort of compete with each other to sort of make a to modulate the emotion that you're feeling. This gives rise to a functional emotional state. This is what is happening in the brain, and their theory is that we won't talk about that because we can't do anything about it, we can't measure it, we can never really say objectively what it is. And the expression of it is again quantifiable, right? So these are the terms that we saw in the last on the last slide. So quantifiable, global coordination, that is the response to this emotion affects the organism globally. There are changes in their motor system, in their endocrine system, in their cognition, in their behavior, all of these things. Second is somewhat related, that is pleiotropy, that an emotion affects multiple systems at the same time: behavioral, biochemical, cognitive. Uh, these 2 points are a little important. We'll see about that in theory of emotion as well, that emotions have a certain valence, that is, it is either positive or negative, very broadly, and they have a certain intensity, that they occur in a graded manner. It could be positive valence with a low intensity, or it could be positive valence with a high intensity. They tend to gain priority over other behaviors. This is also very important in terms of clinical relevance, because we have this tendency to think that we are very intelligent beings, we are a very intelligent species, so we're not really troubled by things such as emotions. But emotions tend to gain priority over other behaviors. They affect your cognition, they affect your thinking. uh, a very common example is if you're trying to study but you're also feeling very anxious at the same time, then this anxiety will take priority over your cognition, so your ability to study may be impaired during that period. Generalizability we discussed already, and persistence is that usually they outlast their triggers, right? It's something that lasts for some time, it persists for some time. It's not like you're eating something, you feel happy, and the moment you swallow it, you're not feeling happy anymore. That happiness tends to persist, or fear tends to persist for some time, right? So this is how emotion has been defined in current literature. So keeping this in mind, right, and this expression will further serve to regulate the emotional state as well as provide feedback for the stimulus as well, right? Once suppose you run away from an animal that is attacking you, then this provides feedback to the stimulus component that okay, now there is no need for this, so now you can calm down, basically, right? So now that we've talked about the definitions that we have of emotion, now let's look at a few of the theories of emotion that we have, right? This is again kind of important from both an exam point of view as well as to understand, because we have a whole, in psychiatry, in psychology, we deal with emotions most of the time. A lot of the work that we do is based on emotion. So we need to know how these emotions come into being and how they can be modulated or how they can be changed, right? So we'll start with three theories. These are the so-called, mm, at least these theories you should know. These are something that will be, people will keep asking you that what is this theory, what is that theory, etc. So the first one is the James Lange theory. So this is one of the oldest theories of emotion that we have, right? And it follows a very simple flow. That is, there is a stimulus. Because of the stimulus, there is arousal, there is physiological arousal. A lion comes in front of you, there is a sympathetic physiological arousal in your body, right? So your perceptual systems, whatever they may be, sight, smell, vision, everything, hearing, all of them sort of converge onto this system in your brain, which causes physiological arousal. And the sort of the understanding of this physiological arousal, our cognitive appraisal of this arousal, is what causes the feeling of an emotion, right? One definition that I left out earlier was that emotion is all these things that we defined, and the subjective experience of emotion is what we call as feeling. This is also mentioned in Fish, right? So when we are talking about our emotions, we are talking about our feelings, basically, right? In common parlance also. So what James and Lange said is that this physiological arousal is what gives you the this feeling of emotion, right? So this lasted for a very long time, and even now there are a lot of circumstances where it is shown to be true, right? For example, you have an upset stomach, for example, and something, you eat something bad, Now we know for a fact, although late this theory was refuted and now we're coming back to it, now we know for a fact that you eat something bad, there's something goes wrong in your stomach, because of your gut brain axis, this physiological sensation is carried to the brain and you feel bad or you feel upset or whatever, right? So in this condition, the arousal is what is causing the feeling. A running theme throughout this is that none of these theories are completely wrong or completely right. Most of them are right in certain conditions, and we've just refined these theories as we go. But a problem with this theory was that the arousal state is common across a lot of emotions. For example, the sensation of fear versus the sensation of anger. Both of them physiologically have very similar substrates, right? There is a release of cortisol, there is sympathetic activity. Even sexual arousal has the same physiological phenomena that arise. But they all have a distinct feeling, right? So if this is true, then they should not happen. Uh, One of the experiments that sort of seems to disprove this is that if you inject adrenaline into somebody, it causes the entire physiological arousal system that adrenaline does. It is norepinephrine or whatever. It activates your sympathetic system. But the person does not seem to feel afraid because of that. He just has an awareness of all of this arousal, but the feeling of fear doesn't really come to this person, right? So based on this, Cannon and Bard, Cannon was the main guy and Bard was his student. In 1927, based on a lot of animal experimentation, gave this theory of emotion, that is what we know as the Cannon-Bard theory of emotion. So he said that these two said rather that the stimulus is perceived at the same time by both the cortex as well as the thalamus. They gave a lot of importance to the thalamus. They basically did studies on uh, cats and other and monkeys as well, where they lesioned the thalamus and they saw what effect this has on feeling. Right. So they said that even though you cut off the thalamus of a person so that the physiological arousal is not felt, the feeling of anger or whatever in response to a known stimulus still occurs. So they said that this happens at the same time. The cortex perceives whatever changes there outside as a feeling, and the thalamus is what is responsible for your physiological arousal. Right. Then much later in 1964, Schachter and Singer sort of modified the James Lange theory. They said that, why is it that the same kind of arousal causes different feelings? Because the Cannon-Bard theory did not really hold up in over time. The same experiments, when they were replicated, they didn't really seem to show the same effect. So most papers or anything that you read, this Cannon-Bard theory is not really mentioned at all. So most theorists directly jump to the Schachter-Singer theory. So what Schachter-Singer said is that James Lange was right. The stimulus arousal and the awareness of that arousal is what causes your feeling. But they said that there is a middle step which they termed as attribution of arousal. Now this is a cognitive process by which we examine the environment or across time, or examine both the internal external environment, whatever our perceptual systems also have a role to play, in the sense that now that I have this arousal in my body, what are the circumstances around me? Is there a lion that is in front of me because of which I'm feeling aroused? Is there a person of the opposite sex who I'm feeling sexually attracted to, hence I'm feeling aroused? Is there something around me for which I should feel angry about? Is that why I'm feeling aroused? So based on this attribution of this arousal, we generate a feeling. So Schachter Singer also had this very interesting experiment, which you cannot do at this point of time. Is that they recruited a bunch of college students and they gave them an injection, saying that it's a multivitamin injection, and they'll be doing some cognitive experiments on them later to see whether this multivitamin has an effect on their cognition. But unknown to them, what they gave them was injections of adrenaline. Right. So all these students were getting adrenaline injections, and they were put in a waiting room, saying that you wait here. We'll call you after some time. So in that waiting room, they put one of their students or one of the people in the experiments, and his job was, for half of the people who got the injection, for half of them, they would be very irritable. I've been waiting here since morning. These people are not doing anything. They would tend to try to sort of, they would act very frustrated themselves. And what they found was that the people with the adrenaline injection in this situation would also get very, very frustrated, much more than they normally would. They would be angry, irritable. They would be, they would go to the reception. They would start shouting at them, create a scene sort of. And for half the patients or half the subjects, what they did is that they put the same guy there, but the same guy would now praised this experiment a lot, saying, "Oh, these psychologists are so good. They gave me so much of, they take, they do so many things for us, and this experiment is so much fun, and I've had a great time of this." And what they found is that these same people, I mean, the second group of people, had an exaggerated feeling of happiness in the same situation, because now the arousal was already happening because of adrenaline, but now they attributed this arousal to the feelings of happiness that this person is sharing versus the feelings of anger that the other person was sharing, right? So based on this, they formed the Shachter-Singer theory, which remained in par, I don't want to say, but remained the mainstream theory for quite a long time, right? So then we come to the three more theories which are more recent and which are the ones that we actually follow at this point, right? I think even Sims just describes these three theories in a lot of detail and sort of uh, cuts through the remaining very shortly, although these are the ones that are actually important to our modern day practice, as well as to understand the neuroscience of emotions, because this correlates with those neuroscientific models, right? So the first one was called the appraisal theory, right? So what they said is that there is a stimulus. Before doing anything else, there is an appraisal of the stimulus, right? Whatever stimulus is there, the brain does an appraisal, that is this good or is this bad? Is this something that I need to act on urgently? Is this something that I can wait on and act? Immediately following appraisal, there is an action tendency, right? This is based on the phenomena that, for example, a lion jumps in front of you. Before you're even cognitively processing what is going on, your body tends to react quickly. You run immediately or you freeze immediately, right? So that is the action tendency. This may even be before the physiological arousal itself. The arousal system also takes time. So there is a rapid wired system in our brain for a rapid to take action rapidly after the appraisal of the stimulus. Around the same time, arousal also starts, and then there is an attribution of arousal. So the attribution step from the previous from the Shachter-Singer theory has remained, but prior to this attribution, all of these things also take place. There is an appraisal of the stimulus, and all of these things takes place at the same time. It's not like the appraisal is completely finished, then there is action tendency which is completely finished, then there is arousal which is completely finished. All of them sort of have a staggered way of presentation. Appraisal starts, there is a immediate first appraisal, oh, this is something that's dangerous, I need to run away. The running away also might start, following which there might be more appraisal that okay, I may not need to run away that much. Like, for example, you're at a zoo and a tiger suddenly lunges at you. Your first step might be to jump back, right? That is a fear reaction. But after a few seconds, your appraisal sort of catches up that, oh, no, there's a cage, there's a glass here, I don't need to be afraid of it. So your arousal might spike suddenly and then it might go down. And attribution, of course, is there, that you attribute whatever arousal you felt to whatever happened in front of you. So this joint phenomena of appraisal to attribution and behavior after that is what we experience as a feeling, right? So this was the appraisal theory. Russell in 2003 sort of added on to this. So these three theories are sort of adding on to each other, even in fact adding on to Shachter-Singer as well, because attribution is still there in all of these. So what Russell said is that following the appraisal of stimulus, following this whole the first step that's in red on top, there is an activation of neural circuits of basic emotion. So what he theorized is that there are specific neural circuits for the basic emotions that we have, fear, anger, happiness, sadness, surprise, disgust, all of these. So so this template of emotion is activated in your brain following the appraisal, because of which there are specific responses and emotional experiences felt, right? So this is a somewhat in between theory, which just basically said that there are certain neurological circuits in your brain which control emotion, and they're emotion specific. Right. So this was supplanted by Barrett in 2006 by something that he called the conceptual act theory. So this is our current understanding of emotion, like from 2006 up to now. This is the one that has sort of endured, right? First of all, there is appraisal of stimulus, like the appraisal theory said, no change from that. Following this, the next step of appraisal is a categorization of this emotion based on valence and arousal. Right. So remember, we talked about in the definition of emotion that there is a valence that is given. Is this emotion good or is it bad? Or rather, is this stimulus something that is good or is it something that is bad? And how much of arousal is required for this? Right. So some part of your brain does this calculation that this is a positive stimulus and this is a positive stimulus with a very high amount of arousal, or this is a positive stimulus with a low amount of arousal, right? So this categorization is done by certain parts in the brain, which is responsible for our cognition of this emotion, and which also starts the core effect. I mean, it activates these certain pathways because of which there is a response, right? So the importance of this theory is that what they said is that these categories of happy, sad, surprised and all is something that we have made up, right? The brain doesn't really say that I'm feeling happy or I'm feeling sad. What the brain simply does is that maybe okay, wait, I have a slide for this, I think. Yeah, what the brain basically does is that valence is slightly high and arousal is slightly high. So this is the functional state in the brain, right? It doesn't really do this functional state is something that we have given a term for in our languages. This is happy or this is excited, right? So you can see on this chart also that if wait, let me turn on the pointer, right? So this is valence positive and negative, and this is arousal positive and negative. You're able to see this, right? Are you seeing some green thing on top?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
पूरा पूरा इमेज दिख रहा है ना तुम्हें? कुछ बीच में तो नहीं है ना?
नहीं सर, पूरा दिख रहा है.
ठीक है. No, I am getting this overlay, that's why. Right. So, for example, if we are having a high valence, whatever stimulus is there, it causes a high valence and high arousal as well, right? So this could be something like alert. This could be something like excitement, for example. You're not just happy, you're excited, right? You're aroused as well as positive. Versus you may have something which is positive in valence, but very, very low arousal. It may be a sense of calm, for example. You're sitting and you're listening to some relaxing music. You're feeling happy. You're not aroused. There's no physiological arousal, but the valence of, or very little physiological arousal, and the valence of it is positive, right? Same for the negative side as well, right? You may have very severe negative valence along with severe arousal, which may give rise to something like anger, versus very severe negative valence with very minimal arousal, which may manifest as something like sadness, for example, right? Or just boredom at the very least, right? What this also implies is that these two categories are mutually exclusive. You cannot have both high and low arousal at the same time, and you cannot have both positive and negative valence at the same time, right? So if, for example, very commonly you may see in your psychosexual OPDs men who are having trouble having an erection, right? Psychogenic erectile dysfunction, I'm saying, right? So this is a point where they ideally should have positive valence as well as high arousal, but at the same time, because of certain past experiences or because of certain cognitions in their mind, their valence is not happy, but it is sad. I mean, it's not towards positive, but it is towards negative. Then they cannot have happiness or orgasm or physiological or a good sense of sexual excitement at the same time, right? Somebody might really want to have sexual intercourse, but because their emotions are on a different wavelength as their cognitions are, they may not be able to go ahead with the act, right? So this is our current, or at least the most commonly accepted model of emotions that we use right now.